Dear Mr. Puri, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your friendly invitation. It is not just a pleasure, but also an honor for me to participate in this conclave. I am saying this not only because India Today is one of the most important and renowned news magazines in Asia, but also because India, as an up-and-coming political and economic power, is of vital importance for our world. This is fully in line with the first Indian Prime Minister Nehru's vision of India as a modern, democratic country that lives up to its international responsibility for peace, justice, and development. The courageous reforms carried out over the past 20 years have contributed to India's strength. They were begun by Rajiv Gandhi and his government, and subsequent administrations continued along the same path. In the early 19th, Prime Minister Singh triggered the economic opening of India and consistently continues to drive it today. The positive impulses arising from such action make themselves felt in the everyday lives of most Indian citizens. Poverty has not been eradicated, but there is less of it. Over the past 10 years, the country's economic performance has doubled. Trade volumes have risen dramatically. With a trading volume of 7.6 billion euros, Germany is one of India's most important trading partners. We would like to expand on this partnership. This year, India will be the partner country at the Hanover Trade Fair, the world's largest industrial fair. And I'm very happy that Prime Minister Singh has accepted my invitation to open the Hanover Trade Fair. His visit to Germany will underline our close partnership. India's economic opening has made the country a very attractive place to invest. This especially applies to the fields of technology and infrastructure. Those areas offer great opportunities for an even more intense cooperation. And, by the way, the process of economic opening must never be a one-way street. Just as it goes without saying that European investors are active in India, Indian investors in Europe must become an equally common sight. If such processes run fairly and abide by the regulatory rules of the game, there is no reason for protectionism. Ladies and gentlemen, this is yet another debate that reveals the ever more dramatic speed of change in our world at the beginning of the 21st century. In today's world, no matter where we live, work, and do politics, we are faced with two major challenges. First, the phenomenon of globalization. This is the intense competition, not just between individual companies, but entire national economies. And second, the central question of international political decision-making today, namely, how can we establish and maintain peace and security in a world that has changed dramatically after the end of the Cold War? The international community must find a joint answer to these two major challenges. Each and every individual feels the consequences of globalization in his or her daily life. Many feel helplessly exposed to the processes and their impacts. And some are concerned that their national identity is at stake, that their cultural identity will be erased through the spread of ever more generally accepted norms. Such criticism must be taken seriously. Leading politicians around the globe are now called upon to convince their populations of the fantastic development opportunities of globalization for all. Opportunities which are generated by global business activity and free world trade. But we will only succeed by influencing and controlling the process of globalization, pruning it back where it reveals tendencies that threaten us, and freeing it where it is limited by protectionism. In other words, what we really need is a humane process of globalization. Ladies and gentlemen, that is why I feel that when it's about globalization, political decision-making is important. Faced with ever faster change in our global economic system, we really need a reliable set of rules and agreements we can all abide by. Such rules would guarantee a free development of competition and world trade. We must do all we can to involve all countries in the global network of economic activity. We cannot afford to see the world falling in two camps: those who benefit from globalization and those who suffer. As free trade increases opportunities for prosperity, we must ensure that poorer countries especially are given access to markets around the globe. They must not be kept out by means of punitive customs or protectionist provisions. What we need is better market access for products from developing countries, and we must also do away with subsidies distorting the national flow of trade. That is why in recent years I have strongly supported progress in the Doha World Trade Round. Unfortunately, last December's WTO conference in Hong Kong was only a tiny step forward. What we now need is a joint effort by all WTO members to take the major steps so urgently needed for global economic development. On the one hand, this will involve a reduction of customs on industrial goods as well as a liberalization of services. On the other hand, the success will necessitate a reduction of agriculture subsidies. Finding a compromise will mean that everybody must move and make concessions. In bringing this about, India has a major role to play. Its voice carries great weight, especially amongst developing and threshold countries. Ladies and gentlemen, in a globalized world, organizations such as WTO must assume a key role. Multilateral trading systems are superior to other systems because they are fairer. A multilateral approach is the only one geared to letting many people feel and see the tangible benefits arising from globalization. It is important to open up the perspective of a life in freedom, dignity, and material security, especially for young people. It is true that globalization and access to world trade have helped more people leave behind poverty and starvation than ever before. By opening its markets, many a country has achieved a faster pace of development and higher rates of growth. Owing the economic progress and development, people are living longer and enjoy a higher standard of living. And some progress has been made in expanding on infrastructure, health system, and better facilities for education. Today's globalized economy also enables poorer countries to get access to new technologies. Via the internet, it allows anybody to tap the world pool of knowledge. Still, there's no direct link between globalization and a fairer distribution of wealth around the world. To this day, over 60% of the world's population have to survive on 5% of global income. Rapid population growth in Africa and parts of Asia is one of the most demanding challenges of the 21st century. The international community of states has adopted a program to deal with this problem. I'm talking about the Millennium Declaration of the United Nations. This declaration is a program for good governance in the 21st century, a program aimed at making globalization a fairer phenomenon, a program supporting global partnership for sustainable development. That is why we fought hard for the idea of granting debt relief to the world's poorest countries. The debt relief initiative was adopted in 1999 during the G8 summit in Cologne under the German presidency chaired by me. This initiative involves 27 of the poorest and most indebted countries. Our initiative enabled them to reduce their debts by $50 billion. The agreement also requires that the countries involved invest more strongly in fighting poverty and commit to the principles of good governance. Ladies and gentlemen, as I mentioned before, the second challenge we are facing is the international security situation. The 21st century has not made our world a safer place. New dangers have arisen. There's the threat of international terrorism. There's privatized violence, the disintegration of entire states and their structures, and the fear of weapons of mass destruction. Old, long-lasting regional conflicts block peace and stability, both in the affected regions and way beyond. But without peace, there is no security. Without security, there is no development. And without development, there cannot be peace. That is why we must all work together. We must use the tool of international cooperation to solve all conflicts and stand united to fend off new threats. In today's world, there's no country that can master all these new challenges alone. The tasks we are facing require a strong and effective multilateral system, a system that is based on the rule of law rather than on the idea of the survival of the fittest. There's only one true forum for such politics of multilateralism, and that is the United Nations. That is why reinforcing the importance and position of the United Nations continues to be a prime task on the international community's agenda. And that is why we must further develop and, even more importantly, we must implement good proposals towards the reform of the United Nations. Ladies and gentlemen, the fight against international terrorism is one of the toughest challenges the international community of states ever faced. The attacks in India, in New York and Jakarta, in London and Bali have made this abundantly clear in the most gruesome way possible. Acts of terrorism are a fundamental threat to any civilization. That is why it is a matter of self-respect for any peaceful society to fight terrorism. Having said that, we are all aware that security cannot be guaranteed by police or military means alone. He who wants to provide security must not only fight violence, he must also go to the roots of violence and terrorism and eradicate them too. To eliminate the breeding grounds for fanatism and terrorism, we must ensure that we provide for social, material, and cultural security. In the long run, the fight against terrorism can only be won if people feel that there's a degree of success in their lives. When they experience that saying no to violence and terrorism does indeed pay a dividend. A return into the international community not only leads to more freedom and security, but also brings better opportunities for development and degree of prosperity. The dividend of peace must not just be theoretical, but a tangible reward for people around the world. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm absolutely certain that intense regional cooperation between neighboring states is an important precondition for peace, development, and prosperity. I say this as a committed European, because it is a lesson we have learned on our continent. The process of European integration, a common market, and joint currency helped us overcome nationalism. Europe, made up of a community of peaceful states, was our people's answer to centuries of war and destruction. The process of European integration is another response to globalization. The European experience of cooperation and integration is not necessarily an ideal formula for other regions around the world. But it very clearly illustrates the importance of regional cooperation towards achieving peace and development. A development that can also be observed in Africa, Asia, and Gulf states. In all of these places, strong, effective regional organizations do valuable work to promote their country's integration into world markets. We know that the rather complex Asian situation cannot be compared with one in Europe. There is, however, an increasing degree of regional integration in Asia too. The economic ascent of both India and China has dramatically accelerated this process. When it comes to peaceful development on the Asian continent, India has a vital role to play. Its closer ties with Pakistan are an encouraging sign. As an ASEAN dialogue partner, a member of ASEAN Regional Forum, as well as of South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation, India shows a high degree of regional responsibility. I'm convinced that these steps towards deeper regional cooperation will lay a solid foundation for peace and development in Asia. I would like to encourage you to continue along this path. Ladies and gentlemen, over the past 3 years, global economic development has been extremely positive, despite high oil prices and political uncertainties. We must support this development and protect it from threats. Global economic development must be independent from resource shortages. Within recent years, the global framework of resource supplies has changed dramatically. This especially applies to the field of energy. Firstly, because of the huge demand from nations such as China and India, who are pushing into world markets. And secondly, because some countries that exported oil and gas in the past will soon reach the end of their reserves and become importers of energy. We have seen how sensitively energy markets respond to changes in supply and demand. It is important that we establish a clear strategy for bringing secure energy supplies into the global economy. Here, too, a multilateral approach is needed. First and foremost, we need safe, reliable, and politically stable energy exporting nations. We must stabilize fragile regions and countries threatened by disintegration. Moreover, we need to invest in new infrastructure in the fields of exploration as well as diversification. But the most important contribution towards a reliable energy supply is a careful use of resources. That is why it is so important to invest in renewable energies and to consistently improve energy efficiency. Over the past 7 years, Germany has focused on further developing the market for renewable energies and is now the world leader in this field. This is an advisable strategy for developing countries too. Ladies and gentlemen, another very serious threat for the world economy arises from a lack of stability in the Near and Middle East regions. Let me mention 3 conflicts that urgently need to be settled. First, we need a political solution for the Middle East conflict. Violence has led to unmeasurable human suffering on both sides. Israelis and Palestinians must find a way out of the vicious circle of violence, triggering violence, which is responded to by even greater violence. Political negotiations based upon the roadmap are the only way to achieve what we all hope for, a permanent peace between a sovereign Palestinian state and the neighboring state of Israel. With Hamas winning the elections, this goal remains unchanged. The results of democratic elections must be accepted. Therefore, there must be negotiations with Hamas too. Russia's invitation to Hamas should be underlined. In these talks, Hamas will be expected to acknowledge Israel's right to exist, and it must also forsake violence. Second, in Iraq, it is important to support the establishment of a stable democratic society and to maintain the territorial integrity of the country. These objectives are right, no matter how one felt about military intervention in Iraq in the first place. I said no to the war in Iraq because I firmly believed that there would have been a diplomatic solution to this conflict. Now, however, what we all want is to support the country's development to benefit the Iraqi people. And a peaceful, stable Iraq is good for all of us. Third, nobody denies Iran's right to a peaceful use of nuclear energy. However, the Iranian government must be convinced to give up the right to produce and, of course, to use nuclear weapons. The most reasonable, and I think the only way to achieve this objective, is by continuing on the path of negotiations. We should strongly support Russia's suggestions made in the last negotiations with Iran, which provides a strong basis for solving the problem through diplomatic exchange. Iran must fully and wholeheartedly cooperate with the International Atomic Energy Agency. However, it is important that this cooperation pays off for Iran in terms of economy and technology. We must avoid discrimination. Iran's right as a sovereign state must be respected. And above all, the use of violence or the threat thereof are unsuitable means of convincing Iran of the benefits of dialogue. Concerning sanctions, I agree with the Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov, who said, "I don't believe we should engage in something which might become a self-fulfilling prophecy. We are convinced there's no military solution to this crisis. I don't think sanctions as a means to solve a crisis have ever achieved a goal in recent history. I can underline it. Stability and security in the Gulf are absolutely top priorities, not just for the countries of the regions, but also for Asia, Europe, and the United States of America. Ladies and gentlemen, an essential element of cooperative peace politics is to promote understanding between different cultures. We hear voices time and again around the world talking about the clash of civilization. We must decidedly fight such opinions. The talk of a clash of civilizations does nothing but fuel extremism. We would be far better advised to emphasize the things that different cultures have in common, to point to the values we all share and which therefore unite us, such as the desire to live in peace and in an atmosphere of tolerance and justice. We want to build bridges between our cultures, not only because it will be an enriching experience for all, but also because it will help to strengthen our economies. It is my firm conviction that an open, respectful attitude is the right basis for sustainable economic development and a fair distribution of wealth. Let me share two last thoughts with you. The more we know about the diversity of cultures and respect other religions, the more we develop a feeling of tolerance. And I'm firmly convinced that this knowledge can help to bring people together and create the basis for successful economic activity in a globalized world. Thank you very much for your kind attention.